Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Trust everything is going well for you today. So, I had a request. In fact, I had more than one. I had actually more requests than I have seen on the program that Jeff Doherty and I did yesterday. And a lot of you have asked that would I please continue the story of creation from the Chaldean account. So here we are, and let's go ahead and do this. So tell you where I'm picking up at. We're going to pick up to the point where man is being cursed, and I'll just let that ride out. And so we're going to pick up from here. And as we go forward, you're going to find out some very interesting things. If you stay with this program all the way to the end, I will guarantee you that you will have probably some of the most, how should I say, deep questions that you've had where the creation story is concerned, whether you believe it or not. I mean, we've all been exposed to it, and it has been told on one side of the fence, well, this is the way it is, and of course science is going, well, wait a minute now, maybe not so fast. But the point here is these are fragments of tablets that were discovered by George Smith, 1875, in the city of Nineveh, that was lost outside of Mosul. So we understand. Now they found these tablets, 20,000, and to date, I think it's over 100,000. But at the time of George Smith's life, back in the 1880s, about 20,000 tablets. And when they found the cuneiform, the Rosetta Stone that broke it open so they could begin to interpret it, these people working for the British Museum of Science were remarkable, just remarkable. They were the pioneers. So let's go forward. You're going to love this story. Okay. So we pick up here in the middle. This forms about half a tablet, being part of the obverse and reverse. And so the tablets have two sides. Remember that. Both in fair preservation, and so far as they go, fairly perfect, but containing at present many obscurities in the speeches of the gods. Let me just make a comment here. Gods. There is reference to a single god, but that reference is quickly replaced by records in establishing there are many gods. Now, one god has 50 names, or so it was assumed there. What I have, in fact, I just bought the book today that is actually updating this with what the archaeologists have found and how they've added to the record, even beyond that of what Zachariah Stitchin found. And this is where Zachariah Stitchin got the information, is from these tablets. So kind of gives it in context. So let's go on. Before the commencement of lines 1, 5, 11, 19, 27, and 29 on the obverse, there are glosses stating that the divine titles commencing these lines all apply to the same deity. These explanatory glosses show that even in the Assyrian time, there were difficulties in the narrative. So let's roll with this, all right? The god Zai, which he had fixed, their account may not fail in preparing. The god Zaiku, noble life, quickly called director of purity. Good kinsman, master of perception and right. Cursor to be fruitful and abundant, establisher of fertility. Another to us has come up and greatly increased. In thy powerful advance spread over him good. May he speak, may he glorify, may he exalt his majesty. Folks, they're talking about us. All right, you're going to see this. All right, let's continue. The god Marku, noble crown, in concern raised a protection. Lord of noble lips, savior from death, of the gods imprisoned, the accomplisher of restoration. His pleasure he established, he fixed upon the gods his enemies, to fear them he made man. Now, I find that interesting that we're getting a narrative here about a God, and then there is another God who is raising concern, something about a protection, and you're going to get really good at this. One of the things I learned in the last, I think it's been about 5.5 months since I started studying this, your mind, your brain will start filling in the lines. I mean, they're just fragments, right? Fragments of sentences, and no different than the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is only different is that it predates the Dead Sea Scrolls by about, I don't know, 2,100 years, thereabouts. So predates the Bible by about, if you take when the book of Genesis was written, almost 1,700 years. So there you go. So here we got Marku was going, now, wait a minute. And then we've got the god Zai, right? Zaiku, that he's now made man. Interesting, right? Let's see what man's being made for. The breath of life was in him. Where do we see that? Tell you where you see that. You see that in Genesis 2:7. You don't see that in Genesis 1:26, but you do see it in Genesis 2:7. The breath of life was in him. May he be established, and may his will not fail in the mouth of the dark races which his hand has made. So let me just stop right here. We are about 7 minutes into this. The first Adam was black. And it's just a fact. He was black. And there it is right there. In the mouth of the dark races, which his hand has made, the God of noble lips, with his 5 fingers, sin may he cut off, who, with his noble charms, removed the evil curse. The God Libzu, wise among the gods, who had chosen his possession. The doing of evil shall not come out of him. Established in the company of the gods. You get that? Established in the company of the gods, he rejoices their heart. In other words, man was their delight. Where did we read that? Well, you read that about the story of Adam. When God would come down in the cool of the evening, and they would commune, right? Subduer of the unbeliever, director of right, of corruption, and the god Nasi. Now, seen that God's name before in other cultures. Keeper of watch, the god of Sahub, swiftly the poor out of them in light. Now, on the reverse of the tablet, catch this. The star, may he take the tail and head, because the dragon Tiamat had his punishment the planets possessing, by the stars of heaven themselves, may they, like a sheep, may the gods tremble, all of them. May he bind Tiamat, her prisons may he shut up and surround. Afterwards, the people of remote ages, may she remove, not destroy forever. To the place he created, he made strong. The Lord of the earth, his name called out, the Father Elu, in the rank of the angels pronounced their curse. The god Hia heard, and his liver was angry, because his man had corrupted his purity. He, like me, also, Hia may he punish him. The course of my issue, all of them may he remove, and all my seed may he destroy. In the language of the 50 great gods, By his 50 names he is called, and turned away in anger from him. May he be conquered. Now, this is the curse. And by the way, it was no cockamamie fruit. We're going to get into that, but just telling you. So look at this with fresh eyes. Here's the curse. May he be conquered and at once cut off. Wisdom and knowledge, hostilely may they injure him. May they put at enmity also father and son, and may they plunder. To king, ruler, and governor, may they bend their ear. Now that means subservience. May they cause anger also to the Lord of the gods, Merodach. Now Merodach, the Lord of the gods. We anger them. Our very voice angers them. Goes on. His land may it bring forth, but he not touch it. His desire shall be cut off, and his will be unanswered. The opening of his mouth no God shall take notice of. His back shall be broken and not be healed. At his urgent trouble, no God shall receive him. Now, as a Bible scholar, I can tell you exactly where you could read this in the Old Testament. Number one, the book of Leviticus, but more getting to the point, go to Deuteronomy 28. This is the curse. 1 through 14 is the blessing. 15 on are the curse. Coincidence? I don't know. I think not. Let's go on. His heart shall be poured out, and his mind shall be troubled. To sin and wrong his face shall come front. Are you digging this? Wow. All right, let's go on. I told you this was going to be great. And if you follow all the way to the end, trust me, you're going to be so smart. You're going to walk around and you're going to be able to tell those people around you, hey, would you like to know where that story came from? I can give it to you. All right, let's go on. Now, in a second copy, which presents several variation lines, 14 to 19 are omitted. The valuable fragment is unfortunately obscure in some parts, especially on the obverse, but the general meaning is undoubted, and the approximate position of the fragment in the story is quite clear. It evidently follows the fragment giving the creation of the land animals, and either forms a further portion of the same or part of the following tablet. The obverse gives a series of speeches and statements respecting the newly created man who was supposed to be under the special care of the deities. Now, I'm going to put a little comment in here. Where do we see this at? Well, go to Psalms 80. You see, that was what was the mystery of Psalms 80. And remember, folks, the Bible is written in a typology. You need to understand that. And when you do, you'll figure it out. All right. So in Psalms 80, you can see now while this God, the Elohim, right? He's sitting in the council of the Elohims, and the big kahuna, and you, who knows, comes in and basically just lays into him. Says, man, you were supposed to watch him. And you let this happen on your watch? Guess what? There's a penalty for that. And that's why when you read the beginning of this, everything we say pisses the gods off. All right, we can go down a whole trail on that one. Let's continue. It happens in this case that there is no clue to the reason for these speeches, the key portions of the inscriptions being lost, but a point is evidently made of the purity of man, who is said to be established in the company of the gods and to rejoice their hearts. the various divine titles or names the gods, and excuse me, I need to move something here, folks. Thank you. All right. The names, the God of noble life, the God of noble crown, and the God of noble lips are all most probably titles of Hia. Now, this is different from the narratives of Enki and Enlil. And all I can say to these tablets that were discovered nearly 150 years ago tell a little different story. So I find it interesting that we were in the company of the gods. Now, there is a certain Kabbalistic teaching that did say that man was created as a god. In fact, I think that many Christian narratives, because there's so many narratives in the schisms of Christianity, you virtually can find one that would almost kind of fit any point of view. But in one particular schism of Christianity, that's what Adam was God. Not the God, but he was a God. And in the Kabbalistic teaching, the first Adam and Lilith, they could fly. They could transport themselves. So you can see how all of this over the millennia can almost be found in every religion today. Let's go on. It appears from line 18 that the race of human beings spoken of is the Zalmat Kyodai, or the dark race. In various other fragments of these legends, they are called Adamai and Adame, which is exactly the name given to the first man in Genesis. So bottom line, folks, the first Adam was black. Get used to it. That's all I can say. And actually it makes sense because typology. Remember the Old Testament, particularly the writers of the Old Testament, they wrote in a codex. What you're reading is, well, it's like the first layer of an onion. All right, let's go on. The word Adam used in these legends for the first human being is evidently not a proper name, but is only used as a term for mankind. Adam appears as a proper name in Genesis, but certainly in some passages is only used in the same sense as the Assyrian word, and we are told on the creation of human beings in Genesis, in the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him, male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. Okay, and there's many different interpretations from that. So, it has already been pointed out by Sir Henry Rawlinson that the Babylonians recognized two principal races, the Adamu, or the dark race, and the Sarku, or the light race, probably in the same manner that two races were mentioned in Genesis. Now, I happen to take exception in George's interpretation here. This has been proven. We now know that he says the sons of Adam and the sons of God, trying to make up for the white race and the black race. But the problem with the sons of God being a race of humans, then you would have to discount Job 1:9. But the Hebrew word is the same in both Genesis 6:4 and Job 1:9. So George is wrong on here. But again, it opens up another mystery. So where did the white race come from? Maybe they were remnants of the Genesis 1:26. Now, you have to understand as well, get the 6,000 years out of that. That's a cockamamie story that there's no foundation to it, folks. What is truth And what history does in fact show, and evidence of even our own genes, we humans are at least 500,000 years old, if not well over 1,000,000. And you're going to see proof to that here very quickly. All right, let me continue on. Told you this was going to be good. So where did the other race come from? I don't know. It appears incidentally from the fragments of inscriptions that it was the race of Adam, or the dark race, which was believed to have fallen. But there is at present no clue to the position of the other race in their system. So now we got mysteries upon mysteries. Told you this is going to be good. All right. We are informed in Genesis that when the world became corrupt, the sons of God intermarried with the race of Adam. We do know that. It's a fact. Just how do you do that, right? All right. And thus spread the evils which had commenced with the Adamites. The verse of the tablet giving the creation of man, where it breaks off, leaves him in a state of purity, and where the narrative recommences on the reverse, man has already fallen. Here, it is difficult to say how far the narrative of the inscription agrees with that of the Bible. In this case, it is better to review the biblical account because, that was the only thing they had back then. There weren't other archaeologists out there digging. And he said, to compare to the fragmentary allusions in the inscription. After the statement of man's innocent, which agrees with the inscription, the Bible goes on to relate that the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, and that he tempted the woman with sin. Actually, the word is beguiled, not tempted. And beguiled is a very old word. And that word literally means to be seduced. Totally. Not only bodily, but mind and soul. Now, this is supposedly the second woman, because the first one, Lilith, said, I ain't having any part of this, which would lend credence to the possibility that man was already created as a god. Don't know. Let's go on. This attributes the origin of sin to the serpent, but nothing whatsoever is said as to the origin or history of the serpent. And that's a fact. I mean, again, that's the problem with much of the Bible. You're presented, it's like walking in the middle of a scene, right, of a play. You're just dropped in, and you've got no background. So you basically have to draw your own conclusions, right? So we don't have any origin or history of the serpent. The fragmentary account of the fall in the inscriptions mention the dragon Tiamat, or the dragon of the sea, evidently in the same relations as the serpent being concerned in bringing about the fall. This dragon is called the dragon of Tiamat, or the sea. It is generally conceived as a griffin and is connected with the original chaos of Thalith of Barsus, the female principle which, according to both inscriptions and Barus, existed before the creation of the universe. This was the original spirit of chaos and disorder, a spirit opposed in principle to the gods, and according to the Babylonians, self-existent and eternal, older even than the gods. Now, let's put some structure to this. It is very clear that there was something before time. There existed something. Now, even in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning. It's very interesting because it doesn't say God was the beginning. It said, in the beginning was God. So, and particularly when you study ancient languages, beginning is something entirely different than what your and what we were taught in construct. The construct is completely different. And this beginning before time, this chaos, when the gods came together, now we don't know where the gods come from. Again, we're dropped into the middle of the play. But in this case, we can see part of the script over there laying on the floor, and we're getting the idea now that there was this chaos. I mean, we know that there were creatures. We know that there, say, life. I mean, it cannot be comprehended, is what I'm trying to say to you. And since it cannot be comprehended, we, as a species, summarily dismiss it, to our own hurt, by the way. So now that you understand, there could be an opposing view that the void was here first, and we're intruding upon it, thus making us the enemy. You have to depend on your point of view, doesn't it? Let's continue. The deities out of this chaos were the first step in the creation of the world. So you can see, whatever this thing is. Now, I have a great science fiction author, F. Paul Wilson. And if any of you have not read his books, I'd encourage you. If you like to start with Night World. And in there is this presence. And there's two of them. And it's not that they really give a crap about anything. They are. And we get this silly idea that, well, one of them is for us and one's against us. Could be that maybe they just really don't care. I don't know. Let's go on. According to Genesis, the serpent addressed the woman and inquired if God had forbidden them to eat of every tree of the Garden of Eden, eliciting from her the statement that there was a tree in the middle of the garden, the fruit of which was forbidden to them. There is nothing in the present fragments indicating a belief in the Garden of Eden or the tree of knowledge. There is only an obscure allusion in line 16 and 22 to a thirst for knowledge having been a cause of man's fall. Let that sink in. Now, isn't it interesting how the story was crafted, that there was the tree of what? Of knowledge, right? Well, now you can see how the typology was erected. And the fact that there really is no place that they can find to be. In fact, they never believed in it. Now, there was a portion. The loss of this portion of the creation legend is unfortunate, as however probable it may be that the Hebrew and Babylonian traditions agree about the garden and the tree of knowledge, we cannot now prove it. There is a second tree, however, the tree of life in the Genesis account, which certainly appears to correspond to the sacred grove of Anu, which a later fragment states was guarded by a sword turning to all the 4 points of the compass. You see, as part of these tablets talk about, but apparently in one of the fragments, man And Tiamat apparently ate of something of the fruit that was meant only for a certain ascended level of beings. And when we obtained that knowledge, it made us the enemies, and that's when the curses were put on us. You see, folks, I don't know how we're born into this, but we're born into a hell. We're born into a preset of conditions that virtually make it impossible to escape. That's why, well, I'll comment that on another program. Let's continue on. In several other places in the Genesis legends, and especially in the legends of Isdubar, there are allusions to the tree, the grove, or a forest of the gods, and this divine tree or grove is often represented on the sculptures, both in the Babylonian gem engravings and on the walls of the Assyrian palaces and temples. When the representation is complete, the tree is attended by two figures of cherubims, one on each side of the sacred emblem. According to Genesis, Adam and Eve was tempted by the serpent. Look at there, folks. I told you this was fascinating. Was tempted by the serpent, eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and so by disobedience brought sin into the world. These details are also lost in the cuneiform text, which opens again where the gods are cursing the dragon and Adam, or man, for this transgression, corresponding to the passages in Genesis 9 to 19. I mean, folks, we apparently piss someone off big time. And maybe that's why we are cursed with amnesia. Oh, it's going to get better, folks. Let's go on. Throughout this, corresponding passages may be found which show that the same idea runs through both narratives. But some passages in the cuneiform account are too mutilated to allow any certainty to be attached to the translation. And the loss of the previous parts of the text prevents our knowing what points the allusions are directed to. Although so much of the most important part of the text is lost, the notices and other parts and the allusions in the mythological scenes on the Babylonian gems will serve to guide us as to the probable drift of the missing portion. It is quite clear that the dragon of the sea, or dragon of Tiamat, is connected with the fall, like the serpent in the book of Genesis, and in fact is the equivalent of the serpent. The name of the dragon is not written phonetically, but by two monograms, which probably mean the scaly one or animal covered with scales. This description, of course, might apply either to the fabulous dragon, a serpent, or a fish. Hey, that's how it is, folks. You know, we're dealing with antiquity here, right? We're going way back. All right. The only passage where there is a phonetic explanation of the signs is the Cuneiform Inscriptions, Volume 2, page 32, section 19, where we have Tarbuth-tooth. I think I said that right. If I butchered it, my bad. For the place or den of the dragon. How interesting. Perhaps connected with the Hebrew word sea monster. The form of this creature, as given on the gems, is that of a griffin or dragon, generally with a head like a carnivorous animal, body covered with scales, legs terminating in claws like an eagle, and wings on the back. Our own hairy griffins are so strikingly like the sculptures of this creature that we might almost suspect them to be copies from the Chaldean works. And you see where it's just all going back? In some cases, however, the early Babylonian seals, which contain devices taken from these legends, more closely approached the Genesis story. One striking and important specimen of early type in the British Museum collection has two figures sitting, one on each side of a tree, holding out their hands to the fruit, while at the back of one is stretched a serpent. We know well that in these early sculptures, none of these figures were chance devices, but all represented events or supposed events and figures in their legends. Thus, it is evident that a form of the story of the fall, similar to that of Genesis, was known in early times in Babylonia. The dragon, which in the Chaldean account of the creation leads man to sin, is the creature of Tiamat, the living principle of the sea and of chaos. And he is an embodiment of the spirit of chaos or disorder, which was opposed to the deities at the creation of the world. Now, check it out up there in that. Now, I can't expand that, but you can see the two deities, and look at the serpent. I did a whole video on this. Now, let's review. It is clear that the dragon is included in the curse of the fall, and that the gods invoked on the head of the human race all the evils which afflict humanity. Wisdom and knowledge shall injure him. He shall have family quarrels, shall submit to tyranny, will anger the gods. He shall not eat the fruit of his labor. He shall be disappointed in his desires. He shall pour out useless prayers. He shall have trouble of mind and body. He shall commit future sin. I mean, I don't know about you. Would you walk in to any scenario if you had this known to you? Okay, two possibilities here. One, we're complete idiots. I don't think that's the case. What I know at 62, I don't know everything. In fact, I probably know very little at all. But what I have come to know is that the universe operates on a set of principles, laws. If knowing you had to run the gauntlet, there has to be something really special at the end. It's just getting through. Okay, let's continue on. No doubt subsequent lines continue these topics, but again, our narrative is broken. And it only reopens where the gods are preparing for war with the powers of evil, which are led by Tiamat, which war probably arose from the part played by Tiamat in the fall of man. Folks, I'm about to blow your mind right here. By all evidence, and George saw it first, this war happened after the fall, not before. And now when you begin to think about the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah, the stories of the Hindu sacred text of the battles of their gods, when you begin to look at the geological account that there have been apparently nuclear wars, which we have witnessed, as I said, this goes back way back. Think about this. And folks, the war hasn't stopped. Now, I'm going to show you how the book of Revelations is made up, folks. It's a fictional story. And I'm going to show you where it came in. You've already seen part of it, but let's go on. Of the subsequent tablets of this series, which include the war between the gods and the power of evil and the punishment of the dragon Tiamat, there are several fragments. The first of these is K 4832, too mutilate to translate. It contains speeches of the gods before the war. The second fragment, K 3473, contains two speeches and shows the gods preparing battle. It is very fragmentary. So let's go, guys. Ready? His mouth opened, a word he spoke, satisfy my anger. Of thee let me send to thee, thou ascendest, thee to thy presence. Their curse in a circle may they sit, let them make the vine, of them may they hear the renown. Cover them he set, and thee change to them. He sent me, he held me, he sinned against me, and angrily the gods, all of them, made her hands, and his hands, Tiamat coming, destroyed not night and day, burning, they made division, the end of all hands. Formerly thou, great serpents, unyielding eye, their bodies filled, fear shall cover them. Several other mutilated lines. The third fragment, K 38, excuse me, is on the same subject. Some lines of this giving the following general meaning. Great animal, fear he made to carry. Their sight was very great. Their bodies were very powerful and delightful. Strong serpent, Ugalu, Ubat, and days arranged 5, carrying weapons, unyielding, her breast, her back, flowing, and at first among the gods collected, the Kingu subdued, marching in front before, carrying weapons thou, upon war, his hand appointed. There are many more similar broken lines, and on the other side, fragments of a speech by some being who desires Tiamat to make war. Are you getting this, folks? We got dumped in the middle of a big old crap sandwich. Plain and simple. The religion, just part of the crap sandwich, folks. Let's continue. All these fragments are not sufficiently complete to translate with certainty, or even to ascertain their order. The fourth fragment, K3449, relates to the making of weapons to arm the god who should meet in war, the dragon. This reads with some doubt on account of the mutilation. Heart burning from in the temple, may he fix the dwelling of the god, the great gods. The god said, the sword that was made, the god saw. And they saw also the bow, which was strong. The work that was made, they placed, carried also Anu in the assembly of the gods. Where have we heard that one? Psalms 80. Yep. The bow he fitted, she, and he spake of the bow thus and said, noble wood, who should first thrust draw thee against? Speed her punishment, the star of the bow in heaven, and of establish the resting place, from the choice of the place his throne in heaven. The next fragment or collection, brings the final struggle between Tiamat and Marduk or Bel. Look at there, folks. Now you see, Stitchin came in and made a complete different interpretation to these. And I think it was the problem. I think that's, anyway, I digress. Let's continue. And this fragment appears to distinguish between the dragon of Tiamat and the sea dragon. And Tiamat, the female personification of the sea, but I am not sure of this distinction. The saparu, or sickle-shaped sword, is always represented both in the sculptures and inscriptions as a weapon of Baal in this war. The sixth fragment, he fixed to his right hand, he distributed, and quiver his hand hurled, the lightning he sent before him, fierceness filled his body. He made the sword to silence the dragon of the sea. The 7 winds he fixed not to come out of her wound, on the south, the north, the east, and the west. His hand, the sword, he caused to hold before the grove of his father, the god Anu. There's Anu all over the place. He made the evil wind, the hostile wind, the tempest, the storm, the four winds, the seven winds, the wind of the irregular wind. He brought out the winds. He had created 7 of them. The dragon of the sea stretched out, came after him. He carried the thunderbolt, his great weapon, in the chariot. Unrivaled, driving he rode. Go, dude, go. He took her, and the 4 fetters on her hands he fastened, unyielding, storming her. Wow. With their sting, bringing death, sweeping away knowledge, destruction and fighting, left hand and fear. Now, I find it interesting when we talk about sweeping away knowledge. It's a very interesting phrase of words. All right, let's go on. The god Sar, dwelling before the weapon, field above, struck the god, them cut in two, said to his wife, break him to break the god, evil, thou shalt be delivered, and thou, evil, thou shalt subdue. The tribute to thy maternity shall be forced upon them by their weapons. I will stand by, and to thee they shall be made a spoil. Tiamat, on hearing this, at once joined and changed her resolution. Tiamat called and quickly arose. Strongly and firmly she encircled with her defenses. She took a girdle and placed the gods for war, prepared for them their weapons. Tiamat attacked the just prince of the gods of Marduk. The standards they raised in the conflict like a battle. Baal also drew out his sword and wounded her. The evil wind coming afterwards struck against her face. Tiamat opened her mouth to swallow him. The evil wind he caused to enter before she could shut her lips. The force of the wind her stomach filled, and her heart trembled, and her face was distorted, violently seized her stomach. Her insides it broke and conquered her heart. He imprisoned her, and her work he ended. Her allies stood over her astonished when Tiamat, their leader, was conquered. Her rank he broke, her assembly was scattered, and the gods, her helpers, who went beside her, trembled, feared, and broke up themselves. The expiring of her life they fled from. War surrounding, they were fleeing, not standing. Them and their weapons he broke, like a sword cast down, sitting in darkness, knowing their capture full of grief. Their strength removed, shut in bonds. At once the strength of their work was overcome with terror. The throwing of stones going, he cast down the enemy, his hand, part of the enemy under him. Then the god Kingu again. Again, the main difficulty arises out of the fragmentaries of these, the state of the documents. But here's the thing, folks. We just read not only the book of Revelations, the book of Daniel, probably go back in Ezekiel and Jeremiah. Yeah. All right, let's go on. However, that the gods have fashioned for them a sword and a bow to fight the dragon Tiamat, and Anu proclaims great honor, the 4th fragment, line 15 to 20, to any of the gods who will engage in battle with her. Baal or Marduk volunteers and goes forth armed with these weapons to fight the dragon. Tiamat is encouraged by one of the gods who has become her husband and meets Marduk in battle. The description of the fight and the subsequent triumph of the god are very fine and remarkably curious in their details, but the connection between the fragments is so uncertain at present that it is better to reserve comment upon them until the text is more complete, and it is now. They found them. This war between the powers of good and evil, chaos and order, is extra to the creation, does not correspond with anything in Genesis, but rather finds its parallel in the war between Michael and the dragon in Revelation 12, verse 7 through 9, where the dragon is called the great dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. This description is strikingly like the impression gathered from the fragments of the cuneiform story. The dragon Tiamat, who fought against the gods and led man to sin, and whose fate it was to be conquered in a celestial war, closely corresponds in all essential points to the dragon conquered by Michael. These fragments of the cuneiform account for the creation and fall agree so far as they are preserved with the biblical account, and show that in the period from BC 2000 to 1500, the Babylonians believed in a similar story to that in the book of Genesis. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed this segment. Let me know. It truly is a different story, is it not? I mean, when you think about this, it's similar, but much more in detail. That's what typology is. The entire Bible is a typology. And folks, if we don't know the beginning of the story, what makes you think we could ever know the ending of the story? You just have to stop and think about it. Really. And if you can grasp that there are just some things that our species apparently will never know, or, and this is my take on this, folks, we're being held hostage. And that's why I believe that if humanity ever comes together, we may be able to break the curse. Think about this. It's obvious by the evidence alone that our species is cursed. We've got to do something to break the curse. And it can't be this cockamamie story of a savior by the very gods that gave us the curse. I mean, that's like someone making you sick so they can make you well. All right, folks, be kind to one another, and we will talk again real soon.